let me introduce our next speaker. So we actually have a surprise keynote. I had mentioned this to everyone beforehand, that we have a surprise keynote. And so I'm going to read you this person's name, and then I'm going to bring her on board. Allyson Plosko. She is a active mental wellness investor, and she is going to be on board with several of her portfolio companies as well. And this will be about 25-minute talk. And then once we finish that, we're actually going to dive into the mindful communication panel, which is cool because a lot of the themes that I've been hearing outside of the business side, a lot of it has to do with how you communicate and how you work with people. And so the mindful communication should be really, really exciting. And then after that, the second part of the program, which is really unique to us, just like these conversations, is what I call productivity coaching sessions. So we have different conversations, some Q&A, some actual just perspective, like on where the industry is going. And then at the end, a exercise hit inspired kind of program. These are all done individually by one person or more, and they'll be really fun. So please don't leave yet. Definitely make sure to stay out as much as you can. If for whatever reason you decide that you need to take a break, or you need to shake your shoulders a little longer, we will be providing recordings like Justin had mentioned. So look for that, by sometime next week. And again, just a reminder, every single person who signed up for this conference is going to get a 21-day mindfulness challenge program. It's 10 minutes or less program that will be sent to you via email starting on Monday next week. You'll get more info on that nearing it, but it's just a way for us to all make sure that we hold each other accountable on incorporating daily mindfulness. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic or virtual mic to Allyson. So thank you, Allyson.
Thank you for having me. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, I'm not seeing the share my screen button. I am also having some weird Zoom issues, so it might be something on my end. But I will go ahead and just verbally talk through my presentation. So thank you all for being here this afternoon. I am really excited to share a little bit more about Velocity, what we invest in, and some of the trends that we are seeing in the market. So as you know, my name is Allyson Plosko. I am the director of Velocity at Vinaj. So I run everything from deal sourcing on through to due diligence and portfolio company support for Velocity. Prior to this role, I was at Village Capital, which is a seed stage accelerator and investment firm based in DC, where I worked on their health practice, which focused on supporting seed stage entrepreneurs that were developing software-based or tech-enabled services to help improve outcomes for low-income populations. So at Velocity, we focus on investing in pre-seed and seed stage companies working to improve mental well-being for people between the ages of 10 and 24 years old. So within that, we tend to focus, we think of our focus areas really bucketed under three umbrellas. One is around access. And so obviously there is it's really hard to have mental well-being if you also don't have access to the right mental health and emotional support tools. And so we look at solutions that are attempting to do that specifically for mild to moderate sufferers of anxiety and depression. And I just want to flag that because a lot of the stats and some of what you'll see later on is really through that lens. And so we don't focus on things like substance use disorders, autism, or some other things that you might intuitively think are bucketed in. And so I just, again, flag that so that you know the perspective that we have. The second umbrella category that we are focused on is on prevention. And so because of the target age range that we're looking at, we think that there's a real opportunity for preventative solutions. And so some examples of this are things like social and emotional learning and education technology, through other things around like general mental wellness creating general mental wellness habits. And then the third category we look at, which is probably less relevant for this conversation today, is around experience, specifically online experience. So we know that Gen Z, according to a Cigna study that was done a couple of years ago, is currently the loneliest living generation, despite their perceived hyperconnectivity. So we're really interested in solutions that can foster social connection virtually, or just create safer, friendlier spaces on existing mainstream platforms. So we get asked a lot why we focus on specifically youth, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, we just know that there's been a significant increase in anxiety, depression, and suicidality among young people. The rate of clinical depression increased 52% for 12 to 17-year-olds between 2012 and 2017. And we know that COVID is just making this worse. So CDC released new data actually today that showed that the rate of the number of ED visits between March through October 2020 increased 31% compared to that same time frame in the previous year. So that's one reason. The second reason is just because of what we know around prevention and onset of illness. So we know that 50% of people who will develop a mental illness show symptoms by the age of 14. 75% do so by the age of 24. We also know that the earlier you intervene in a mental illness, in the trajectory of a mental illness, the less of an impact it has on someone's life later on. And so we think that there's just a huge impact that you can have on individuals by intervening early. And then the third is just from a market opportunity, we know that there's a lot of activity happening in adults, and we're starting to see similar activity for solutions designed for adolescents and teens. And so we saw a gap in the funding market for those types of solutions, and decided that this was really an area, just given the stats that I outlined earlier, an area that we thought was really important to be supporting. And so over the past year, and I think especially within the last 6 months, we've heard a lot of interest from folks around wanting more insight into what was happening around adolescents and teens. And so we were really curious around what this actually meant for the amount of investment going to this space. And so we looked at the amount of investment dollars that were invested into youth-oriented companies aligned with our focus areas between October 2019 and October 2020, and compared that to the same time in the previous year. And what we found was that the investment into these companies, the dollar for dollar amount tripled in a year. So I think this is indicative of a larger trend that you're seeing in mental health, where you're seeing companies crop up around serving specific niche populations. So whether it be adolescents, whether it be LGBTQ+, or people of color, you're seeing companies that cropping up that are really attempting to own kind of the clinical stack for a niche population. The second, the broader piece of this is that you're seeing investment increase within our focus areas across all ages. It's not just youth that's seeing an increase in mental health. And so between that same time frame, October 2019 and October 2020, we saw increased investment. We saw an increase in investment by 75%. And not only that, but we saw 80%, a little over 80% of those investment dollars went into rounds that were at the Series B or later, except with the exception of one that was at the Series A, and into rounds that were greater than 10 million. So this is, I think, again, indicative of the broader trend that you're seeing in VC of larger, later stage rounds. But I think it's also a signal for us that the mental health market is not just growing, but it's also continuing to mature. And so we have over the past year and a half, we've looked at hundreds of companies that are in some way, shape, or form looking to impact mental health and well-being. We've filtered out those that weren't really relevant for our focus areas and came up with 8 categories to sort our pipeline. And I can walk you through quickly what each of those are. So the first one is wellness and self-care. And so we think of these as self-directed programs designed to foster mental wellness habits, designed to foster habits that we know have a positive impact on mental wellness. And so you can think of something like a Calm or Headspace would fall into this category. The second is on improved online experiences. Again, this is an area that might be less relevant for this crowd, but includes the solutions that are working to increase social connection virtually, that are trying to keep mainstream platforms safer. A good example of this is a company called Bark. They're based out of Atlanta. They recently raised a Series B, and what they do is smartphone content monitoring on the phones of kids and adolescents. And they do a passive monitoring that allows that provides parents with early warning indicators that maybe a kid is being bullied, or maybe they're starting to begin sexting, and so just providing some additional insight into what their kids are doing on their smartphone. The third category is positive skill building. And so this one is different from wellness and self-care in that it tends to not be self-directed and is usually some kind of program designed to be implemented by maybe a teen or a therapist. The most, probably the biggest cluster of companies we have in this category is around social and emotional learning and education technology. So there's lots of companies that have cropped up that are designing curriculum to bolster the social and emotional skills of students and help teachers deliver that in the classroom. The fourth area is non-licensed support services. So these are a range of, whether it be a chatbot or a peer-to-peer or coaching, that provides emotional support for low acuity issues. And so I think the most common types we see are either the chatbot or the coaching services. Again, working to just provide basic emotional support for low acuity issues. The fifth area that we've seen is around engagement and adherence. And so you can think of this as just like a typical patient engagement solution that you might see in physical health, but directed at mental or behavioral health. And really the goal for the solutions in this category is to increase visibility for therapists for what happens between sessions. They can also, we've seen solutions that will push, homework or certain content activities to be done in between sessions. But the ultimate goal is to, again, provide that visibility, identify triggers, and identify early warning signs that a patient's distress might be escalating. The sixth category that we've seen is around emerging technology. So this includes everything from virtual reality to extended reality, augmented reality, wearables, really that are attempting to just redesign the way mental health care is delivered. So we've seen a lot in the virtual reality category, specifically for the illnesses or issues like, for instance, phobias, social anxiety disorder, where there's some kind of exposure therapy element that tends to be very high touch, but also is very promising to create in a virtual environment. The seventh category is assessment, which it's been interesting to see how this category has evolved since we first started. So when we first started, there was a crop of companies that were attempting to digitize paper-based assessments like PHQ-9s or GAD-7s. But especially, I would say, within the last 8 months or so, you've seen those kind of go by the wayside, just because you've seen companies in other categories recognize the need to better understand the ability into how their patients are progressing. And then the final area that we've identified is around clinician access, which is you can think of as like the teletherapy. It's probably the most familiar category for most folks, but it's everything from teletherapy to telepsychiatry. I would say that we've also seen this category evolve since we started. And I think when we began looking at this, there are still several big players that are just attempting to make it easier to access therapists. What we've seen over the past, I would say, year or so is that you're seeing this development of solutions for specific populations. And so one of the best best predictors of whether therapy will be effective is a therapeutic alliance. And so simply put, that means the relationship between the therapist and the client. Yet a lot of platforms have not optimized for that or built the provider network to optimize for that. And so you're starting to see companies like, for instance, Daybreak Health, which is one of our portfolio companies, that's building teletherapy specifically for high school students, that are attempting to build up the provider network with the hope of that's uniquely positioned to serve a specific population in hopes that that generates better therapeutic alliance. And so those are the 8 categories. Transitioning a bit to what do we actually look for in the companies that we assess for investment. I would say it comes down to really 5 big things. One, we're investing at the early stage. So like any early stage investor, team is just so critical. So there's some soft skills that we look for around like tenacity and, how hardworking, work ethic, et cetera. But I think for us, what's really critical is how well do they understand the end user and the target customer that they're hoping to sell to, because oftentimes.
Hey, Allyson, I don't mean to interrupt you. It's a phenomenal presentation, but do you mind turning your video on?
Yes, let me see if...
There you go. I see you now.
Okay. Well, sorry, my internet has been very wonky today, so that might be why it's in and out.
No worries.
Okay, let's...
Yeah, we can see you.
Is the video still on? Okay, perfect. All right, and so so like I was saying, around the team side, on the team side, we look for just whether or not how well a founder understands their end user and their target customer. And some of the indicators for us in this are, for instance, how do they have lived experience in the problem that they're solving, potentially as that target end user? Have they worked with customers before, the type of customer that they're looking to sell to before? Have they worked within that type of customer? So those are a few things that we assess on the team side. The second is just the problem that they're solving and whether or not it's a big enough one, and whether it's a true pain point, the classic pain pill versus vitamin comparison. This third area is on outcomes. And so at the pre-seed stage, especially, we're not expecting a full clinical study to demonstrate effectiveness, but we are looking for teams that do understand that they are going to have to demonstrate outcomes, have a sense of what they can demonstrate, and have a plan to do so. And then the fourth area that we look for is around engagement. And so is the product something that you would want to use? Is it something that you would want to keep using? Because engagement is so critical to demonstrating outcomes. If you don't have engagement, you won't have outcomes. So we want to make sure that this comes back to the team really understanding the end user in order to be optimizing for them to actually use whatever it is that's being developed. And then the final thing we look for is differentiation. In certain areas that we look at companies in, it's very competitive. And so we want to make sure that we understand that there is clear differentiation and that whatever is being built also has an eye for defensibility in the long term. And so with that, we've made 6 investments to date. You'll actually be hearing from 2 in just a quick second, but just a couple of highlights from others that you won't be hearing from. I mentioned Daybreak Health, which is building a digital mental health clinic for high school students. Mindfulness Health, which delivers trauma-informed care through text messaging for urban youth of color. And then My Life, which was actually acquired by Meredith Media last year, provides mindfulness and meditation for people under the age of 25. And so with that, like I said, I really appreciate all of your attendance this afternoon. I will put my email in the chat in just a second. I had this on a slide, but unfortunately I could not get my slides up. But I will put it in the chat. Would love to hear from you. I'm always happy to keep in touch with folks who are interested and motivated to invest in this area. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our portfolio companies, Manatee. And so I will have the CEO, Dama. I believe she is on the line.
Yes. Could you make her co-host? She's on there. You have to change her role to co-host.
Okay, let's see.
Also, could you change Sandra to the host? She can take care of it all if it's easier too. I mean, Sandra, sorry.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, can I see Dama? Okay.
Very cool. Is Dama, you ready to present?
I am ready to go. I was just hoping to.
There you are. We see you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Allyson, for that lovely introduction. I'm super excited to share a little bit more about Manatee. I have been instructed to keep it short and sweet, so I will do so, but certainly we'll leave my email afterwards as well, so you can just reach out to me if you have any additional questions. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Dama, and I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Manatee. And it was really interesting hearing also the categories that Allyson described, because I think we certainly will fall in a few of those. But the purpose of Manatee is really to empower providers by connecting families. And, a lot of people always ask, why did you even focus on pediatric mental health? And for me, it was like, one, it's a personal story, but also certainly subscribe to everything that Allyson has mentioned, whereby I always say, if we want to actually make a tangible change in society, and we have to focus on children, the social ROI is obviously significantly higher. And no offense to us adults, but to a certain extent, we're a little bit of more of a lost cause, so to speak. So you can really change the trajectory of someone's life if you focus on early intervention. So my brother was diagnosed really early on with a variety of behavioral health and mental health disorders. And it really led me to understand the challenges that families face going through this as well. And the key problem that I always came back to was, it's really hard to reach families the 99% of time that they're not in a therapy session. So therapy can be incredibly productive and helpful through a variety of tools, but ultimately it's a 1-hour session in a 168-hour week. So what do we do to support families at home or in school or in daycare? And that's really where Manatee came in, and the challenges that I saw within my family, that with 2 working parents, no one was ever on the same page, but also at the same time, therapy just wasn't that fun it's not that fun for any child, but it certainly wasn't that fun for my brother. So when we think about building the solution, we really think about building a tech-enabled wraparound service for families so that we engage them and we really empower them. And the key areas of focus are, one, that engagement. And when you engage families, that's when you can help them adhere to the treatments and the skills and everything else that has been built out. And then only then you can drive improved outcomes. Now, the way that we do this is within our provider view. And I didn't want to go fully into the product, knowing that we may not have enough time, but in our provider dashboard, we enable them to set goals, treatment plans, there's exercises in there, everything that you can really think through. And we have created a standard library with our clinical psychologist that is evidence-based. We work with amazing clinical partners to generate some of that content and the structures. And then that information gets sent to both the caregiver and to children. So we love it when parents are involved in the whole process. So they really get, in a full outline of which goals they're working on in between sessions and what is also helpful for them, additional resources, tips and tricks and everything else that you can imagine for parents. Because being a parent, and I speak from experience, I have 3 kids under 4 right now. During the pandemic is, there's a lot going on. So we really focus on supporting parents. And then, of course, for children, we have 2 separate views. We have one that's specifically designed for teens and adolescents, and then one that's focused for 12 and under, essentially. They range from, we have an automated chat bot that gives them helpful exercises and gets a better understanding of how kids are doing. It's of course linked with their parent and with the provider. We focus on short exercises, goals, and we also provide clinical assessments. So throughout this whole process, we want to give information back to the provider so that they understand what is working, what's not working, but also how our depression or anxiety scores trending over time. So that's a little bit about our solution. And ultimately, we really want to drive like an increased level of access outside of the office and really help parents take a lot of that care into their own hands and make children really feel successful throughout the whole process. So we work with an amazing range of like partners and customers. So we went through, it's a year ago, we kind of had our anniversary. So we did do Techstars. We are part of the Children's Hospital LA Digital Health Lab. We have been working really close with Texas Medical Center, and they're still also a clinical partner of ours, where we work really closely with them in designing and further developing. And then generally our key area customer today is large pediatric mental health centers. So Children's Wisconsin, LA, Colorado, and we do a lot within community mental health centers specifically because, we focus on Medicaid and safety net populations as well. And then why do providers even use Manatee? So we focus on 3 core areas. I haven't put clinical outcomes in here right now. We actually have launched 2 research or IRBs. They are in a clinical fashion, but we did launch 2 large research projects that have not yet finished, but super excited to see those outcomes. But we focus on treatment adherence, of course, valuable insight, and just general usability and ease of use. So with that, here is some of my information and details. So get in touch with me if you want any more information or want to touch base. I'm always excited to connect with people who are working towards the same goals, which ultimately is making sure that everybody feels happy and healthy and we can build a better future. So I guess with that, I'll hand it over to Allyson so we can hear from Maslow, which is an awesome company too.
Awesome. Thank you, Dama. Great presentation. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Ross, who is CEO of Maslow.
All right.
Hello. It says I'm unable to start video because the host has stopped it. But I'll just go ahead and share my screen. This will be...
You should now be able to do it. This is Ash. We just made you co-host, so try it now.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah,
Hello.
we see you, man.
So
Thanks.
I will be super quick because I know that we're running short on time. I just wanted to share some stuff about Maslow. My computer's being kind of slow. First, sort of the name behind Maslow definitely comes from the psychologist Abraham Maslow. Some of my past work, I built some robots through the Star Wars franchise, and spent 5 years building toys, did some stuff at Google, and just was really inspired by Abraham Maslow's teachings around personal growth and how do we help people grow. And so I started the company Maslow, and we take this idea of what a companion is, think like BB-8 or like a Siri, and we help our partners build these types of companions to enable better communication, to enable better awareness of data, et cetera, things like that. Some of our partners, some of the examples that I can show around like what a companion can do, we have an example of like a dating companion being able to help people show up more authentically and understand how are they being portrayed by particular people on a dating app or website. There's examples of like a therapy companion where in between those one-on-one sessions, there's highs and lows of what happens in therapy, and being able to just share your thoughts and feelings through voice, through text, through pictures, so the therapist has better awareness is another one of the companions that we help one of our partners build. And then another one is a writer's companion that helps script writers with writer's block and things like that. So they can, again, a companion is there to help overcome challenges, build your resilience, and have people go off and do the things that they want to do. I can share also very quickly the latest companion that we're launching as a family companion around SIGB. Basically, it's here to help families and social workers in the foster care system have more awareness and communicate more effectively. So I'm happy to share if anyone who's interested in wants to check out the technology or talk more about Maslow companion stuff. We post a lot of our code open source on GitHub because we believe being transparent and helping people deploy these solutions is important. So happy to share that. And then the last thing I wanted to share is this little demo. So this is like I haven't shared this with anybody. It's sort of a web demo of like a Maslow companion. I always feel so like we'll see how this well I'm So this is just like one example demo of one of the prototypes that we've built around sort of like a more chat body-like interface, where not only are you getting the linguistic reactions and all. It's really cool with all this too, because we're using things like GPT-3 to auto-generate these responses. But much like you teach sort of children, we have a back end where folks can go in and shape if there's specific deterministic interactions that they want. We allow our partners to do that. I know this was all kind of over the place because I'm trying to keep under time, but happy to dig into more for anybody who wants to see more.
Well, thank you so much, man. This is really, really, really cool, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. Actually, both of you, just both the entrepreneurs that took the challenge to present at a conference without, really knowing us. I've never met you both. So want to appreciate you both for being on board. And of course, thank you so much, Allyson, for leading our keynote, sharing the opportunities with mental wellness and where things are going. It's super, super exciting to I get inspired when I meet investors in the space, and I get even more excited when I hear from very specific kinds of verticals. Like I love how you said initially, Allyson, that you're focused on this Gen Z kind of younger age theme, which is so needed and cool. I mean, I would say I mentioned earlier in the presentation when we did our intro slides that Gen Z and millennials is like the most stressed out generations in history right now. I mean, they are, and that's a whole nother conversation. We don't want to, take up too much time on the topic, but I think from a common sense standpoint, that's what's kind of out there.